So the S&P 500 just saw its best May in 30 years, which is a crazy thing to say because in April, we were at almost all-time highs for fear in our fear and greed index. And quantum stocks this week saw a little bit of pullback. So I'd like to go over a few tickers. I'd like to cover Rigetti, IonQ, QBTS, QUBT, and I'd also like to do a bonus stock. I'd like to look at BigBear.ai as well. So we're going to look at our quantum watch list. We're going to look at the wider market, and let's jump right in. So we can see from the heat map that today was pretty flat. When we see a lot of gray in the market, it means that stocks didn't really move too much. NVIDIA down 3%. NVIDIA has had a really tough time getting above 140 and staying above 140 at this point. It's going to take some clearing up of some of this macro stuff with China and that type of thing for NVIDIA to finally start to retest and maybe make new all-time highs. And we see just trading flat across the market. Let's take a look at our quantum watch list. Amgen was up $4.64, a 1.64% change. Honeywell was up. Actually, QBTS D-Wave had a late day rally and ended up in the green, and IBM was also in the green. And then there was quite a bit of sell-off on the watch list. Of course, Quantum Emotion, QNCCF, which I've talked about a couple of times, is still in a penny stock status and is still very volatile. So that one is probably going to move a lot until it establishes a more firm hold as a stock. LAES was down almost 10%. So that was a little bit of a move down for LAES. QUBT was down. Rigetti, IonQ, ARQQ, and even our quantum ETF was down as well. There are a few factors this week. We had the escalations with the Trump-China tariff situation. Once again, we see that Trump has left Doge. The market has overall been quite resilient. So I wanted to talk a little bit about quantum stocks and the recent run that they've had, and then in the video talking about BigBear.ai. So I have IonQ front page chart here from TradingView. And what I like about it is we can see the performance over different time periods at a glance. So we can see 1 month we're up 50%. 5 days we're down 3%. But of course, these last 2 trading days have felt like, oh, there's so much sell-off. But then when you look at it from the perspective of 6 months or 1 month, the returns have been pretty nice for IonQ. Today it was down 6%. We're going to go into the candles and that type of thing, but let's take a look. LAES on the month was up 35%, was down 5% over the last 5 days, and over the last day was down 9%. D-Wave had a crazy month, up 144%. Over the last 6 months, up 479%. And even today, eked out some green. Over the last 5 days, it's had some sell-off. We're going to go into the candles, and we'll talk about price levels, but down 8%, almost 9% over the last 5 days. Rigetti, over the last 6 months, is up 380%. Over the last month is up 40.98%. Over the last 5 days is down 7%. And QUBT has seen some nice gains over the last 6 months and month. It's down a little bit today. And for the week, it's about flat. Okay, so let's go into the candles now that we've looked at. So IonQ's quite interesting because what has happened with IonQ is we saw in just one single trading day on Thursday, May 22nd, we had a 45% run. And then IonQ has kind of been in this 44 to 48 channel. Historically, if we look back 3 months, actually, we need to look back even further for our price history. We see there's very little price history between 44 and 48. We actually have a lot more in price history between 40 and 44. So it wasn't surprising to me at all that the stock has pulled back a little bit and is now more in this 40 to 44 range. And we should probably actually, now that we had this drop today, go ahead and put in this other line so we can see. So the lines help us kind of see historically what price ranges the stock has traded in. And we see that in the past few trading days, when it's made its rally, it's rejected off of 48 at least 4 times, 48.68. It's come down, and 44 held for a little bit, but it wasn't able to stay up in the nosebleeds. So now it's in more of this 40 to 44 range. So what can we expect going forward for IonQ? Well, I think this pullback is healthy. And I think if we look back to where IonQ was, which was in the low 20s, and we end the week here, we're still up 100%. And we're still in a place where IonQ has a ton of price history and price support. In fact, I think there's a pretty solid amount of support at 36.38 if the sell-off continues. So let's just go over a couple quick cases. Base case, I think it would potentially come down to this 36.38 and then hang around 36 to 40. In an ultra bearish case, it would come down to 36.38. It would have a hard time getting through and then may go back down to 30 to retest. In a bullish case, I see it coming back up into the channel of 44 to 48 and hanging out in here, maybe pushing through if macro and tailwinds allow. So that's IonQ. Let's take a look at LAES. So LAES is an interesting one because it is a stock that I've been watching very closely, and I think you guys have heard me talk about it maybe a half dozen times at least. This one yellow line here, this 388, has really been a thorn in SealsQ's side. And SealsQ is a post-quantum cybersecurity play, and they're based out of Europe. And the stock is just starting to get some momentum. As you can see, it was down in the low 2s. And it's been pushing up. It's been pushing up, and it just keeps getting knocked back down on this 388. And we can actually see historically that in previous rallies, it's been rejected at 388 as well. Unfortunately, it did not close above 388. In fact, it closed down at 336. So it's very hard for me to call this a bullish reversal, although we are building some nice price history between 345 and 388. We have some price history. If we look back, it doesn't tend to stay in this channel. It tends to either go down or go up. It doesn't tend to stay here. So directionally, I'm just going to give 2 cases from this point. Since we're here below this 336 support, my bearish case would be we would move back down to something like 280 and just kind of hang out there. In my bullish case, we'd come up and we'd continue to be in this 336 to 388 channel next week. And you know what? I'll give an ultra bullish case. If we can get above 388 and use 388 as support, I could see it moving up to its next level, which would be this 433. Okay, QBTS D-Wave. So I know a lot of you who follow this channel are really closely following this stock. I've talked to a lot of you. I know some of you have sold your position. I know some of you are still buying this stock. Let's just zoom out and really fully appreciate what has happened since our earnings, okay? Before earnings, the stock could be purchased at 688. It moved up 187%, and it closed the week up 140%. If we look at the last 5 days, there's been considerable sell-off, and we actually see what in a pattern, a bearish pattern that is starting to emerge called a head and shoulders. So if I kind of draw the shoulder, and we can see that that could potentially be a trend. What was a little bit bullish at the end of the day today is that we saw this late day rally and we saw the stock end green. So that was nice because there was some sell-off all week in the ticker, that it did end in the green. So there is some positive sentiment still and some buying still happening for D-Wave. If we look at the 6 month, we know we're in all-time highs. We know we're in nosebleeds. So where does the stock go from here? Well, I've drawn out some levels previously, so prepare for a bunch of lines to go on the screen. And these are just to indicate what I would see as potential areas of resistance or support. So if we look at this 1612, on our first leg up in this rally, we were hanging around this price. We have established in the 1728 to 1743, a couple trading days of price history. And even up here above 1743, D-Wave was hanging out up there. So I want to give a couple of cases, and I think that this could come into play because this was our gap up, right? So if we see sharp sell-off, so in a base case, I see D-Wave coming back down to 15 and just being a $15 to $16 stock. Hopefully it can just hold until its next upward catalyst, whether that's from the sector or whether that's from its self-propelled momentum. In an ultra bearish case, it would come down, it would break through this $15, which is a key psychological and technical level. And then its next stop down would be 1326, which I hope it would use as a support. But then the next stop down would be 1192. So we do see there's still some safety nets kind of waiting to catch QBTS. I imagine D-Wave has a lot of buyers stacked up at these levels. So keep an eye on those levels if this bearish price action in this head and shoulders continues. Now, on the bullish side of things, we do have a gap to fill here up to 1728, perhaps this $17 as a psychological level we need to break through. And then we have a bunch of different potential spots for rejection before we would look for 19 again, before we'd look for 1953, and then retest all-time highs. Now, what are potential catalysts for D-Wave at this point in time? D-Wave is a great marketing company. So if they have a new partnership, if they announce a new system sale, if they announce a new client partnership, any sort of research paper that's released, anything that adds to their 2025 momentum, that of course will send the stock most likely higher. Now, all of these quantum stocks are doing well in a risk on environment. But if we go back to something like April where it's risk off, then we'll be talking about a lot sharper sell-off and these stocks coming down more towards their actual realistic valuation. So we'd be looking at more aggressive sell-off if we get to a risk-off environment. So keep that in mind as well. These are risky stocks to hold, but they do have the potential to keep moving upwards if catalysts continue to add up. So I'm not overly concerned with D-Wave. It's held now for a couple weeks. Since the 21st, it's held above this 15 and it closed at 1635. And I think that it's very possible that this bullish rally and this bullish trend is still alive. So if we just draw this rising support, we would want to see, we could see that if we've seen in this market, definitely with BigBear.ai, with SoundHound recently, with these small cap stocks, when they get down to their rising support, they tend to explode upward with velocity. So if it's to follow the same pattern and we're to stay in a very bullish type of market with a lot of investors looking for speculative tech plays like this, then that could be some price action as a bounce off the support. If we break through this rising support, then these levels that I talked about will come into play for D-Wave. All right, so Rigetti, the self-proclaimed R&D company, is kind of sandwiched. If you look at these two gray lines here, it's been between 7 and 14 for a while. Now, if you look at the last couple earnings, I point this out a couple of times. What happens after earnings? They miss earnings and the stock goes up. They miss earnings. The stock rallied into earnings and has been rallying ever since. So there's a pretty clear bullish uptrend happening. So if we connect the bottoms here, this is similar to D-Wave. There's been quite a bit of sell-off. Let's pull up our RSI. So we ended the day a little bit kind of in the middle of the RSI. So there's not a big clue in there for us. Let's look at the volume for Rigetti. So the volume definitely picked up during this rally, during the big quantum rally. And we've seen some volume kind of trail off, which is something I've been looking at as well. When volume trails off, then the stock also tends to sell off. But what's interesting right now to me about Rigetti is we closed at this 1219 point, but that's awfully close to this rising support. And historically, what has happened is we bounce with velocity over our rising support. So what could we expect next week in good macro? Let's start with the bullish case. We would see a run up and potentially a rejection off 1460. Could Rigetti finally break over 1460 and get back into nosebleeds? It would need a catalyst or something in the sector that, like the quantum sector, like news or some sort of proponent, I think, to hold above 1460. But Rigetti actually looks even more bullish than D-Wave from a technical standpoint, in my opinion, at this point in time. I think there's no real head and shoulders. There's clearly a bullish uptrend on this rising support. It's very far away from its April lows. Now, if it breaks this rising support, then we could, let me present a bear case. It breaks the rising support and hits its head on 1150, which it's had issues with before, then it could continue down and look for that $10 price point. Again, in an ultra bearish case, it would come down and work its way down to 7 again. But will this stock be under $7 with the amount of momentum in quantum? I don't see it unless we get into a risk off environment. I think it's even unlikely that it would get down to 7 again, the way that stocks are being priced in this market. Okay, let's look at QUBT and then Big Bear. So QUBT for the last 5 days has been in a sharp sell-off if we look at the last 6 months. So if we look at QUBT and we look at the last 6 months, there's pretty clearly a bullish reversal that has happened. A bounce off of the rising support, bounce, 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 and it looks like it's possible that it could bounce again. Now, will it come up and hit 1281 and come back down? Will it hang around this 10 to 1281 position? I would like to see some of these quantum stocks just hold and do something like this. Like in a perfect world, I'd like to see just some consolidation and to build up some price history. Everyone who wants to sell and get out, and everyone who wants to buy and be in, and then get ready for the next leg up if there is a catalyst. But from a technical standpoint, it does look quite bullish. It has broken 1281 multiple times recently. There has been a decent amount of volume, and we are sitting right at the rising support. So a lot of these quantum stocks are at the rising support. So the question will be next week, do they bounce off the rising support and continue an upward bull trend, or do they break their rising support and do something more like this and trade sideways in a base case? Or in a bear case, do they break rising support, break previous price history support, and start moving down? And I think that we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so BigBear.ai. So we know that Palantir just had a crazy day. I think it closed at $130 a share. So everyone's looking for the next Palantir. That's kind of why we're seeing 6 months, 100% price increase on this stock. You've heard me talk about Big Bear for months. So you've had a chance potentially to make a position, even in the 2s or 3s. The last month, it's gone up 23%. In the last 5 days, 11. In the last day, 7%. So very nice returns so far, but you can see that historically it has been a volatile stock, a roller coaster of a stock. What I've been noticing this week is there's been a lot of pump fakes. So we had a lot of volume that came in on the 27th, and we had this big rally up to above 450. It wanted to hold for a little while, and then there was sell-off, and a lot of traders, day traders are in this. Then it sold down and came below this 416. Then it broke its $4 support and traded under $4. And then today it broke above 4 again and then got sold off. So you can see it can't really make up its mind in the short term, but the longer trend is this a baby Palantir? Is this something that I want to be in case Big Bear gets a new contract? If they post a quarter with more revenue, if they're able to get some of the defense money that the White House has been talking about a lot in this administration. But I draw this blue line out here because I want you to see this rising support that's happening and that we often see in growth stocks. Doesn't mean it will go up, and will it always bounce off this support? Well, we could do the same thing, but the opposite direction. We could draw a downtrend that it was in since its big run up, where the stock ran to over $10. So right now we do appear to be in a bullish reversal. It's really good that the stock closed above that key psychological level of $4. So now what happens next for BigBear.ai? What is the next stop for Big Bear? Well, we look back in our chart and in the price history, and it starts to get a little bit shaky. We're kind of in this area where Big Bear has only made a stop a few times. We'd have to go back much further. In the history of Big Bear, I just want you guys to look at something for me right here. You see this volume, these volume candles down here? The volume indicates the amount of trading, and look at the amount of volume compared to the lifetime of this stock. There was almost no volume in 2022, and now in 2025, with Palantir going on its run, people really, really are interested. Could this be something that is a next Palantir, or even 1/10 of Palantir people would be happy with? Could you see a green candle like this and a retest of all-time highs? That's I think why people are making their position. That's, if we zoom out that far, you can kind of see that the trend is that way. Could it kind of roll sideways and do something like this and build up over time until there's another catalyst that sends the stock higher? It's possible. If you're in Big Bear, just know that historically it has moved down, and it has got down to $1. It's got down to $1.55. If you can't handle the heat, then get out of the kitchen. This is one of those stocks that can move down quickly, and people can exit the play quickly if they don't like something. So, but if we look at the last 6 months of price action, it does look quite bullish, and it doesn't look like there's much resistance ahead. I mean, we could say this, that it's kind of sitting in a key area where, if we get closer to the chart and we look at the 5-day, we actually closed a little bit off of the rising support, and we're not oversold or overbought on the RSI. We have plenty of volume to indicate that we're still in a bullish uptrend. So keep your eye on BigBear.ai. It looks pretty good. All right, guys. So we just did 6 stocks in like 20-ish minutes. Went really deep into the charts. I had a lot of fun with this one because we're looking back a month as well. We're looking at the performance of all of these stocks, where they are, where they're going, speculating on some different cases. So if you enjoy content like this, help me out by leaving a like, leave a comment if you're in any of these names, if you have any predictions. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I know a lot of people will watch this content and don't subscribe. Please consider subscribing so you can stay tuned to future videos. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to y'all soon.